Well, it is so good to be here. I have never been to this part of Florida before, so it's great to get a chance to take in the sights and go for a walk along the beach. And I'd like to know who else woke up this morning feeling brave and bold and ready to be very courageous. Good, good. I'm in the right place. Sometimes I ask that question and there's like 3 hands go up, like, okay, but good. You guys are, I can feel the Paul Davis spirit, and it is really special for me. I speak at a lot of different events. When I come to a place and come to a group of people, and you really get, there's a massive community and a spirit, and the culture of Paul Davis, really just the energy is palpable. So fantastic to be here with you. So I've been I was listening to Rich and Ed and Mike, and obviously courage is what it's all about here. And so just to kind of give you a little bit of a sense of what it is that I guess my angle on courage, it aligns with what actually Mike was just quoting somebody else. Courage is the willingness to act in spite of fear, absolutely. And you know, the truth is that today, more than ever before, we live in this climate of fear, and we're pummeled 24/7 with reasons to hunker down, play it safe, you know, stick your head in, don't put yourself out there. You know, whether it's in politics, whether it's global trade wars, there's so many reasons why we're supposed to be feeling afraid and playing it safe. But when it comes to you being as successful as you are capable of being, individually, in your teams, but all of you together collectively, what it takes is that willingness, yes, to take action in the presence of your fear, but also the mindset that says change is happening whether we like it or not, and the only way to really seize the benefits that change always offers, the opportunities it always offers, is when we open ourselves up wide to it and go, all right, bring it on, let's see what we can do here to get ahead of that and really make the most of those opportunities. So I learned a little bit about overcoming fear growing up, as you just heard in the introduction, on a farm in rural Australia. My father milked cows for 50 years, left school at about 16, milked cows for 50 years. My mother, she actually joined the convent when she left school and was a nun for 9 years. Everyone's looking for the scandal? No? Yeah? Well, she left the convent, then she met my father, and then went on to have 7 children. We're a bit like the Von Trapp family, Sound of Music. And so growing up on the farm, there wasn't a lot of money in milking cows. It wasn't a very big farm, and I remember leading up to about the age of 10, saying to my dad, can I please have a horse? There wasn't, you know, please have a horse, please have a horse. And I think he sold a cow to get the money together to buy me a horse. And as with so many things, when there's a lot of kids, he was like, buy it a few sizes too big and they can grow into it, get a bit more use out of it, like shoes and clothes and horses. So for my 10th birthday, I got a horse. And I got out there. He was a little bit bigger than what I thought. This is Robbie, my horse. And so I would get up every morning and I would bridle him up and I would saddle him up and I would get out there and I'd start to learn to ride him. And the thing is that in the beginning it was really scary, but after a while I got, pretty good at riding Robbie, and then I realized there was a reason that Dad probably got him pretty cheap, because he was 23 years old and he was going to be made into dog food otherwise. And he didn't go very fast. And so I started pleading, can I get a faster horse? Please, can I have a faster horse? Well, there was a drought, there was even less money than before. And then in the lead up to what was a New Year's Day, my dad went into a raffle, and it was 20 cents a ticket or 6 for $1. At that stage, there were 6 kids in the family, 7 was on the way. And I prayed, dear God, please let us win a horse. Please let me win this horse. Sure enough, we won a horse in a raffle. Now, have you ever heard of that saying, don't look a gift horse in the mouth? Well, he wasn't old. He was actually very young, but he was crazy. And he would go from 0 to 100 in about 5 seconds. So by this stage, I was about 12. I had to dial up my courage yet again and get out there every morning and learn to ride my second horse, Smokey. Don't even have a photo of Smokey. I don't know why, but maybe it's because he went so fast. But what I learnt over those years is that growth and comfort can't ride the same horse. And for you to grow and for you to achieve those goals, $5 billion 10 years from now, if I got that right, yes, you can't do that staying comfortable. You cannot do that if you are just sticking with what is comfortable. You have to embrace discomfort as a prerequisite for your success. And the problem with that is that as humans, we aren't wired to get out there and be uncomfortable. In fact, the desire for safety and for security and for avoiding failure and avoiding rejection and avoiding feeling stupid is in this constant tug of war with our desire for growth, our desire for learning, our desire for change, our desire to forge new ground and come up with better ways of doing things. And that is just what it is to be human. We often call us human beings. I actually think we are more like human becomings. We spend our whole lives evolving and growing and stretching and learning and falling down and picking ourselves up and becoming who it is we're capable of being. And the same thing is true on an individual level, on a team level, on an organizational level, on a larger social level. So for you, as you listen to the things I have to share, because I'm going to share with you a few things about how can you actually find the courage. I mean, we talk about courage, be brave, be brave. We've been listening to this for thousands of years. But how do you actually be braver? Because the fact is, it's hard. And if it was easy to put yourself out there and take risks and sign up for the, Paul Davies University, and if it was easy to just go out and have those conversations and, as Ed said, give that love, more of us would be. It's not. People don't get the feedback. People don't have the conversations. People don't put themselves out there. They don't embrace change because, frankly, it's really uncomfortable. So a few little things. Any neuroscientists in the room? That's great. I can pretty much make this stuff up then. But a quick little lesson in how your brain is wired. So our brains, now with neuroimaging technology, we're able to look at which parts of the brains light up when we're faced with a decision. And what we now know is that our brains are twice as sensitive to potential losses as they are to potential gains. That is, when you're thinking, do I give this bit of love, this feedback? Do I put my hand up? Do I speak up? Do I try this out? Do I even take on this goal and really sign up for that? We are twice as likely, we're just wired, we're twice as likely to focus on what could go wrong, on what we could lose, on how we could make a fool of ourselves, than on what we could gain. It's just how we're wired. Likewise, we're wired to come up with worst-case scenarios. We can catastrophize and scare ourselves back into playing it safe. Let's stick with the status quo. Oh, what'll happen? I remember when my first book came out, I was actually living in McLean, Virginia, and I had written this book. The school I went to in rural Australia had 13 kids in it with one teacher from 5 to 12, my elementary school. And so I didn't get no great lessons on, where the apostrophes went, etc. And I remember in the lead up to my book coming out, I'd been afraid to write a book because I had this whole little voice in my head saying, who do you think you are to write a book? You didn't study literature, you're not that, you're not a PhD, you're not this, you're not that. And my husband had actually said, why don't you just write the best book you can now? Just give yourself permission to write an imperfect book. And when you're old and wise and you've got a PhD or whatever you think you need, you can write another one. So with that, I wrote my first book called Find Your Courage. And in the lead up to it, I self-published it, and then it got picked up by a big publishing house, and it was going to be coming out around the world. And I was terrified that, people would go, who the hell is she? Who did she think she was to write a book? And I remember waking up in the middle of the night, and in my mind's eye, so clearly was me on the front page of, not the Florida Gazette, but of the New York Times. And it was my photo, and it just said, world's worst author. Now, let's face it, that would have been really good publicity because people would have bought that book to go, how bad is the world's worst author? But I share that story because often when we're thinking of doing something, we come up with these worst-case scenarios that in reality are really unrealistic. We also tend to underestimate ourselves, and ladies, We do this a lot more often than the guys. We tend to doubt ourselves more, second guess ourselves more, back ourselves less. That's my experience. We also tend to discount the cost of inaction. Now, having listened to Rich and Ed and Mike and various people up here on stage, you guys are clearly, you know, we have to change or we're going to get left behind. You know, there's a saying about change. You don't have to change, truly. Change isn't necessary because survival isn't mandatory. But if you do want to survive and actually thrive and get to number one, you cannot discount the cost of inaction. And here's what. We often can imagine how we'll feel an hour from now, a day from now, if we have the difficult conversation, if we try something and it fails, if we, put ourselves out there, out of our comfort zone, out where we're exposed, and it doesn't work out. We can imagine how we'll feel. Oh, I'll feel really terrible. I'll feel like a loser. But what we're not so good at doing is putting ourselves in the shoes of the future us, 1 year, 3 years, 5, 10 years from now, and asking ourselves, how will I feel if I don't? What's the cost to me, to my team, to everyone around me if I don't take action? And often we kid ourselves and we come up with this, oh, well, it's not so bad, we'll figure it out. We've been sticking with this before and it's worked. And we come up with these reasons why it's okay to stay where we are. And that feeds what's something called sunk cost bias. Sunk cost bias is the tendency to continue investing in a losing proposition based on how much we've already put into it. Just curious here, does anyone here own an article of clothing, shoes, something that doesn't really fit you well, but you spent a lot of money on it and you can't bear to throw it out? Yeah, I see a few hands going up. That's, you're a victim of sunk cost bias. It's like, yeah, I'll do this. It seems like a good idea. We invest in it, and then we can keep investing in something because of what we've put into it. And if we had the chance to ask over, would you buy it? Most say no. But if you think about Concord, the British-French governments, they went on for years after years after year, investing in a losing proposition because it wasn't commercially viable. But they're like, yes, we're going to make this commercially viable. But we've already spent so much money, we have to keep putting more money in. But sometimes we can do that on an individual level as well. So just be mindful of where your brain, you have cognitive biases that can keep you sometimes from taking the brave action, from taking the risk, from putting yourself out there. And so what does it take to overcome them? It's really about choosing the mindset that you want to bring to your work, to your leadership, to your customers, your clients, to your life. One mindset that people live in is, I think, a very fear-based mindset. Anyone know anyone who is just always worried about everything that could go wrong and they stick only with things that are very, very comfortable? Are they sitting next to you? No. I know some people that they're constantly just stressed out about all the things that could go wrong, and they don't ever try new things. And so they see the world black and white. There's what's safe, there's what's predictable, there's where I know I can't fail and can't mess up, and everything else too dangerous. If I can't control every element of it, I'm not doing it. If there's any chance that I might nail this first time and look really good, I'm not doing it. It's driven by a desire for certainty and control. And if you're a bit of a control freak, then, sometimes it's hard to do things when you don't know all the facts, and you have to be decisive amid the ambiguity. And we live in what's called a VUCA world: volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity. If you haven't heard that term before, VUCA. And those who will do well in the VUCA world are those who are willing to take action and be decisive amid the ambiguity, amid the uncertainty. The second mindset is what I think of as the courage mindset. It is risk ready. It realizes that to be effective, you have to be out there in your courage zone. You have to be giving yourself permission not to do it perfectly if you're learning something new, to try it even though you may fall short and not get the absolute optimal outcome. If I had waited until I knew how to write a brilliant book with the literary skill of J.K. Rowling or Shakespeare, I would certainly never have written my first book, nor those that have followed. If I had waited until I knew how to give a perfect speech, I wouldn't be here today. And I'm sure at the end of this I can go, well, could have been better with that, could have been better with that. But again, asking yourself, what am I missing out on if I don't do that? And for you, you'll have your specific answers. And if not now, then when? And if not you, then who? You've got to be willing to put yourself in a place where you are open to not nailing it first time every time, because that's how you learn, and that's how you grow, and that's how you forge new ground. And for you to get to the $5 billion mark, you're going to have to try some things and not always get it perfectly right, but it's in the doing, in the trying that you learn. And recognizing that every one of you, how you act, you are, whether you're in a big leadership role or you're not, you've got 0 reports to you, how you act impacts others. It inspires them, or maybe it scares them. But where are you putting your focus? And where are you giving yourself permission to be uncomfortable and to learn as you go? A few years ago, one of my children was turning 13, and I said to him, Ben, what would you like for your 13th birthday? He said, I was waiting for him to ask for some Xbox game, and he said, oh, Mum, I'd like to jump out of a plane. I was like, what the hell? I said, Ben, what? And he goes, yeah, you did it. I said, yeah, but I was 20. I was much more mature than you, and I only did it once. And he said, yeah, no, I'd really like to go skydiving. And I was like, okay, well, I've got 4. I guess I can lose 1. No, I did not think that, but I think I had friends who thought I thought that. So I decided to buy my son Ben via Groupon, a certificate to do skydiving. He would do a tandem dive. And so I went out, I got him this thing, and I was driving him to the drop-off zone. And I'd been focusing on what a great experience it would be for him. He's actually not a risk-taking kid. That's my 4th child, my Child versus Wild, Bear Grylls kind of child. But Ben is my 3rd. He's actually, a bit more sensible, except for this decision. And so I'm driving him there, and we're going along in the car, and I decided I wasn't going to focus on what could go wrong. I wasn't going to catastrophize and focus on all the potential risks. But suddenly I was, and my mind went to what it would look like if the parachute didn't open. And I'm driving along, and I say to Ben, are you nervous at all? And he looks over at me and he goes, well, I wasn't. So I dropped him off, and he went off and went on the plane, and I sat there waiting. And then I looked up, and I could see this little dot. In fact, I could see about 5 dots. I had no idea which dot was my child. But finally, he came down and he landed. And I ran over to him, and I said, you live, hallelujah. I said, how was it? He goes, oh my God, Mum, that was phantasmagorical. Now I know I want it for my 14th birthday. And I said he had to pay for that himself, and he hasn't been back since. But I paid for photos that they did, and this is a picture of him, and you can see from his eyes how that experience was. And I shared that with you because sometimes the things that will serve us the most, that will help us grow the most and help build our courage for bigger things, are actually doing the very things that scare us. So how can you do that? Firstly, set your sights on a vision that inspires you, on a bold vision with a big why. Any aspect of your business or your life where you don't have a vision of what it is you really want is an area where you are essentially not operating on full power. If you think about a ship adrift at sea that hasn't kind of figured out where it's going, it's at the whim of the tides and the currents and anything else, and could end up in a place it doesn't much like. Rich shared with you, this is where we're headed. This is where we want to be 5 years from now, 2 billion and all the other metrics, 10 years from now. But you yourself need to be really clear. How does that translate for you in your business? Where is it you want to go? A lot of people go through life in what I call a kind of autopilot mode, going through the motions, They're moving through it. They get up, they do what they do, they go along. They're kind of operating in default mode, but they're not really clear. This is where I want to go. This is what I want to achieve. This is who I want to be. And often can find up in a place they don't much like. And so for you, get really clear. For you, even 3 years from now, where would you really like to have things be 3 years from now? And if you aren't really clear about what it is you want to have accomplished and what you want to have learned and how you want to have grown and who you want to have been for others as an individual, as a leader, as someone that can inspire and bring out the best of others and serve others and help others in their time of need and make sure you're helping grow capacity for others to help others in their time of need, then you aren't operating on full power. So I encourage you, get really clear. What does that look like? What does that feel like? Lily Tomlin, the comedian, once said, "I always wanted to be somebody. I should have been more specific." Who do you want to be? Who do you want to be? And when people talk about you behind your back, because you know, they do, what do you want them to say? How do you want to be described? Who do you want to be? And being mindful that if you want to be someone who is really making an impact for others, and I define leadership as our ability to inspire others to learn more, to do more, to dream more, or to become more. John Quincy Adams, that's his definition, then you are a leader. And so for all of you, you are leaders in your own right, whether or not you identify yourself that way or not. But who do you want to be? And get clear, what's the invented future that I want to live into? Because if you don't have a vision of where I want to go that's really clear and meaningful for you, you could end up going along in this autopilot mode. There was a study that was done in the UK 2 years ago. They interviewed several thousand people. And they said, how often do you think you're sort of in what they called autopilot, that you're just kind of going through the motions? 97% of people said they were in that mode at least once a day. But that, what does that mean? That means sometimes when someone says, can you do something, we say, yeah, sure. Or we go along with things without even thinking. We're not really clear, what's the big why? Is this what I even want to be doing? Am I investing my time, my energy, my resources in what gives the biggest bang for buck? You know Pareto's principle. 20% of what we do produces 80% of the outcome. Are you focused on the 20%? And if you don't have a very clear vision of where you want to go and you haven't set your compass, you can easily be spending time on stuff that isn't producing and adding the value. So be very clear, for the sake of what are you willing to let go of the old and forge a new ground? You know, Rich talked this morning not just about the metrics of where you want to be in terms of financial success and market share #1. That's fantastic, great, got that. But what the research shows is that to harness the best in ourselves and to harness the best in others, we need to have a cause that's bigger than just bottom line, that's bigger than just what I get. Oh, I get to make this much money, I get to have a bigger house, that's all well and good and great, fantastic. I get a bit of kudos. But how is what you do meaningful, and how does it serve others? And I've already heard that spoken to numerous times since I've been here, over yesterday and today. How does it serve others? Because you help people in times of need when they're suffering, when they've experienced something that's rocked their world, where they're having a hard time. So socially and in relationships, you help people in that way, but also in your own team. You know who you are for the people you work with. And environmentally, the physical environment that you work in, that others will have to live in. You know, your goal is to get people back into their beds and back into their businesses, so that their physical environment can allow them to go out and do what they want to do. You know, our biggest why, having that clear, this is why what I do matters. You need to be really clear about why what you do matters. Because you know how I said we're wired to stick in our comfort zone? Unless you're clear about why the hell you should leave it, why would you bother? Why would you bother to give that feedback to that person who you saw not do something particularly well, or you know would benefit from something specific, but you know it's going to be awkward and, oh, I don't want to hurt their feelings and they might get upset and, oh, gee, it's just too hard. Why would you bother? Because you care. You care about them. You care about something bigger than yourself. And if you don't give that feedback, when we don't give feedback, we deprive others of an opportunity to better themselves. And so be clear, what's your own mission critical here? A few years ago, my husband was coming up to his 50th birthday. And I said, what would you like to do for your birthday? And he said, I reckon it'd be really cool to go on a safari in Africa. Anyway, the son, Ben, who jumped out of the plane, he goes, yeah, that sounds good, but we've been to the zoo a lot. What the hell? I mean, my kid, yeah, anyway. And he said, but wouldn't it be cool if we climbed to the rooftop of Africa while we went on our safari? And I was like, Ben, we live at sea level and we don't go hiking up hills ever. So I don't know why you think that's like a good fit for our family. He goes, yeah, but wouldn't it be amazing? Anyway, he went away and built a PowerPoint presentation. And he sat us down as a family and he did this whole PowerPoint presentation. He had the Rocky soundtrack playing, and here's Kilimanjaro, it's the tallest mountain in Africa, and it's one of the world's 7 summits, and it's this and it's that, and he had the whole thing worked out. At the end of it all, and he said, and for Dad's 50th birthday, our family would climb to the rooftop of Africa, and it would be amazing, and for all our lives, we'd always talk about that. And I'm like, yes, that sounds great. And I think the others were sitting there going, it sounds really high. But we decided to take on, as a family, climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. Has anyone here climbed Kilimanjaro? No, I did have someone actually in an audience once going, no, but I climbed Everest. And I was like, oh, okay, you give the talk. So we set off to Tanzania, and we didn't have all the right gear. We hadn't done a lot of training, certainly nothing at altitude, which is a bit of a problem. But we set off and we spent forward. We hired people to help us do it. And we got to the base camp, and then on the day of the summit day, we got up very, very early. So at this stage, my kids were aged 13 to 18. It was 3 years ago. And we got off and we set off, and Ben, that son, I told my kids, you have to pack yourselves for your warm stuff, because I'm that kind of under-parenting, non-helicopter parent style mother. And Ben goes, oh, I got 2 left gloves. I was like, that's a problem because it's freezing up there. So kids are crying, his hands were cold, and one of the guides had to give him his gloves. And anyway, we set off, and within about a half an hour, my youngest son, Matthew, he was throwing up. He was 13. Within another half an hour, Ben was throwing up because the altitude really kicks in, makes you feel pretty nauseous. Within about 2 hours, I was throwing up, had a headache, felt sick. I was like, kept looking at Ben going, this was your idea. Who ever thought of this as a good family vacation? But we plodded along, and it took us 9 hours to get to the top. And I'm telling you, they were the most grueling 9 hours of my life. We walked this fast. And my heart was beating out of my chest. I can't tell you. I was like, if I'm going to die of a heart attack, today is the day. So I know my heart's good now. That's a benefit. But we got to the top, and we were all lying there. We couldn't speak. We were past speaking. No one could speak. And I said, guys, we have to get a photo. So we got this photo. It was the only time we smiled all day. And then we went down, and we all got into our tents and slept for 12 to 14 hours. But I share this with you because if we had focused on what was probable and we'd said, what are the odds that we'll all make it, we would never have set off. But together, we did something pretty cool because every one of us was cheering each other on, and we all had different points in the day. We were like, I don't think I can go on. But not one of us wanted to be the one that bailed. Believe me, I thought of it numerous times. But I didn't want to have to live with my kids going, yeah, but Mum wimped out. She just said it was all too hard. No, we all dug deep. And together, I can assure you, not one of us, well, maybe my husband, maybe my older son, but I would never have made it without everybody else. It was a team effort. You have no idea how incredibly successful you can be. The blow's actually even number 1 out of the water, unless you're willing to commit, to roll your sleeves up, to press on and keep taking another step, even when you go, this is hard. And so for you, You know, we've all got our own summit that inspires us. Not everyone wants to climb Mount Kilimanjaro or any mountain, and I can assure you I took Everest off my list after that. But we as human beings, we often live in a very restricted circle of our full potential. Whether it's 7% of our brains we use or 30%, whatever the number is, I don't know. The researchers debate it. But all of us live in a restricted circle of our potential. And we cannot unlock that potential unless we commit to something that's big and stretches us. And if the goal was easy to achieve, seriously, if it was easy to get to $5 billion, it wouldn't actually be worth going after. It's got to be bold. It's got to be a stretch. It's got to call you to do more and to dream more and to learn more and to become more than you otherwise would. And so often what gets in our way with that is we go, yeah, that all sounds good, yeah, all nice and well, but I don't know about me. Because all of us live in a story about who we are and what we're capable of. I grew up and my dad used to say I was bumblefoot because I wasn't particularly coordinated. And I had this whole thing, I'm not athletic, you know, that's just not who I am. And I was in my 30s, going to a boot camp. I was living just outside DC, and then I ended up running and going, I actually can run. My legs do run. And then I went in this 10-mile cherry blossom run, and I remember crying when I crossed the finish line, because I was like, I was waiting for like CNN and Fox and everyone to come out and go, she ran 10 miles. Because it's like, yes, I did, this is a miracle. Because I had a story that I couldn't do that because I'm not a runner. My legs aren't made for running. Now, you can laugh at that and go, that sounds really stupid. But all of us have stories that we buy into. We have assumptions that we buy into. We have beliefs we buy into about who we are and what we can do and what we can't do based on some past event, based on something said to us once, maybe a long time ago. And we live out those stories as though they're the truth. And they form these mental maps we have about what we can and can't do. And if you keep finding yourself butting up against the same problem, then it's likely you're operating on an assumption that's actually getting in your way. Our assumptions kill possibilities if we're not challenging them and testing them. They can keep us like in a straitjacket, not even trying things, because we go, oh yeah, but I can't do that. I'm just not good at that. That's not who I am. That's not my skill set. So I want you to think about a problem. Who here's got a problem right now? Who here knows problem people? Are they sitting next to you? Okay, yep, I can see a few. Yep, they are. All right, well, I want you to try this on for size. I want you to think about how a story that you have about that problem or problem person could actually be getting in the way of you dealing with it more effectively. A little model for you. So we create a story like, it's just impossible to work with Rich. He's such a difficult personality, you know, you just can't talk to him. And so then I tell myself that, I'm like, what's the point? I'm all resigned, what's the point? So I don't have a conversation, so I never actually resolve the issue or whatever. And so it becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy. And often it's easy to look at it in others and go, oh yeah, I can see that person. They've got such an issue with that. But we're not always as good at identifying it in ourselves. It can become like a blind spot. I'd like you all just to fold your arms right now. Cross your arms. That's it. Simple exercise. Now I just want you to look down and notice, have you got left over right, right over left? What are you? Okay, now uncross your arms. Now just cross them again. I assume you've just crossed them exactly the same way. Yep. Now I'd like you to uncross your arms again. I know, this is high tech. And now I want you to cross them the opposite way. Okay, this table here, you've got an F. Some are still, Mike's still trying to figure it out. He's like this. Yeah, your son told me you were special. He said, Dad's special. We are creatures of habit. We all have a default mode. We all have a default way of interpreting the world around us, of processing it. And sometimes we meet certain people and we go, oh, they're all idiots, those people, or I don't like those people, Or we might have a problem. We go, I'm hopeless with those situations. I don't do confrontation. It's just not who I am. Or I'm terrible at the details. Or I'm this. And we have a story and it's our default and we go back to it. And you know, you might say, hey, I'm here. I'm pretty good. I'm in this room. My stories are working for me. They are, largely. But they can always get better. And we have to be willing, and it takes courage to step back and take a look at how you're looking at your problems and take a fresh look at how you're looking at your opportunities. Because how you see the world and how you see Paul Davies and how you see the opportunities that exist for you in this market where there's a lot of change and the consolidation and all the different things that are going on. It's not determined by what's actually out there. It's determined by the eyes that you're looking at it through. And we like to think that how we think things are is the way they are, but actually no, that's how you are. And if you've ever recognized someone who keeps finding themselves, I mean, it's other people, not you, of course, who you see them, they keep doing the same stupid things. Do you know anyone know any people like that? You just keep seeing them doing the same stupid things? You know, I'm like, what the hell? Do they not learn? It's because they just keep repeating that story over. They think a certain way. And often when we don't like the outcomes we're getting, we go back and try another action. Really, we've got to go right back to the beginning and go, what is it about how I think it is that's getting in the way? Where do I need to unlearn some of the assumptions that I have, some of the rules I'm operating under, that are actually so that I can relearn what I need to know? And I know that you within this market and this industry, you've got some ideas about this is the way it is. And this is how you get from point A to point B. And you might have some differences of opinion where some of the people who've been up on stage and they say, well, this is how you're going to do it. And you're like, yeah, nah. I encourage you to step back and go, well, what if maybe they're right? Or what if maybe there's even a third way here? And what if I shared that? And what if we got in a conversation about that? I see so many people in my own work who continually are their own worst enemy because they're operating with a mental map that keeps sending them up a dead end or continually the same problem in different clothing. So be careful what you tell yourself. Not everything you tell yourself is true. And if you've got, I say, victim stories, which is, oh, it's not my fault, or this, if it wasn't for them, if it wasn't, oh, everything would be fine. Or villain stories, this person, if this person didn't exist or this person wasn't there, then I wouldn't have this problem. But I can assure you, if they weren't there, there'd be someone else you would find. But be careful even in your language. Earlier today, Rich said, you know, there's a lot of changes going on in the market and consolidation and this and that and the other. And he said, you know, is this good news or is this bad news? And then he said, it's just news. It's the story we wrap onto things that says, oh, this is disastrous, this is terrible, or this is fantastic. But it is the facts, there's the facts, this is what's happening. Now what are you going to do with them? Be careful of the story that you tell yourself about your challenges and your problems and those problem people. And what I know is that the biggest challenges that you have and the biggest problems that you have are the most valuable opportunities for you to learn something that you don't know, to grow into a person that you might not otherwise become, and to be a greater source of influence and positive impact for others. But you've got to be willing to step back and challenge that story. Because the stories we tell ourselves, the stories we create, they create us. So I suggest you even just ask yourself, when you're thinking about a problem or a problem person, just ask yourself, what's another story I could tell here? What's another way I could interpret, explain what's just happened? That I have been passed over for this opportunity, or this person hasn't treated me well, or this shouldn't have happened and it's all their fault. You know, where do I need to take a bit more responsibility maybe for how I contributed to it? Or maybe there's a learning here that I haven't taken on and I need to learn something that I haven't learned. Next up, and this obviously threads through everything that, frankly, everyone on this stage is talking about. And that is you engaging in more and braver conversations. I'd be curious, put up your hand here if you can look back and think of a time you wished you had spoken up and had a conversation, but you didn't because it was going to be too uncomfortable or awkward and you regretted it later. Have a look around the room. Pretty much all the hands, and those who haven't put their hand up are probably too afraid to put their hand up. But the reality is that as human beings, we live in conversations. Conversations, they are what allow you to grow your influence. They are what allow you to build trust, to build rapport, to help others do things better. As Ed was talking about, to give a bit of love to people. Let me talk to you about this. I've got something I want to share with you that I think will be helpful to you. And what happens is that often the most important conversations we need to have are the most uncomfortable. Maybe it's saying no to somebody, and you don't like to say no because you're a nice person and you want to say yes because they want you to say yes. But you know you can't do what they've asked you to do in the way that's supposed to be done. Maybe you need to give some feedback. Maybe you need to ask for help. Maybe you need to go up and introduce yourself to someone and say, I'd really love your help on something. I see you're doing this really well. I'd love to learn how you're doing it. Could you tell me that? And of course, that can be uncomfortable because, you know, maybe they'll go, seriously, you don't know? And that's what you're afraid of. We have to lay our reputation on the line, maybe, our identity on the line, our vulnerability on the line. And so often we don't have the conversations that we most need to have. But having worked in lots of different organizations, I can tell you this. It's the conversations that don't occur, the ones that people aren't having, maybe not addressing the white elephant, not addressing the thing that's causing frustration, that can actually exact the steepest tax, that actually issues that aren't talked out get acted out. And over time, they kind of fester, and then they'll come up in a way that's not very constructive. So I want you to think about, when I asked before, have you got a problem, or do you know of a problem person? Think about where there's an issue that's causing you some level of frustration right now. I'm sure there's something, because we're human beings, there's always going to be something that we're frustrated about. And ask yourself, where am I not having an important conversation? Or where do I need to maybe be more candid in the conversation? Now, of course, speaking up isn't about talking down. It's about treating other people with respect and dignity. But as I interviewed someone recently, I did a women's leadership panel, and she said to me, I'm nice, but I can still be nice while I'm firing someone. In other words, I'm not saying you're firing anyone, but I'm just saying that you can still be kind and respectful while giving sometimes candid and difficult feedback. And other people benefit from that. So if there's something you genuinely want to say, chances are there's someone who genuinely needs to hear it. And it takes courage. Often the things having worked with people who are incredibly senior roles in big positions, often the thing they say they still struggle with the most is giving feedback, is having a conversation where they feel really vulnerable. And it does make us feel vulnerable because we're dealing with the emotions of others. But they're the conversations that actually can reap the biggest rewards as well. That said, I'm talking a lot about taking risks and putting yourself out there, but here's the deal. Just because you're being brave and you're being courageous doesn't mean everything you touch will turn to gold. Has anyone here ever tried something and you didn't get the result you wanted? And if you haven't put your hand up, let me tell you, you're living way too safe. Because you should be trying things and not getting the results you want regularly. I had the opportunity to interview Richard Branson a few years ago, and I said to him, tell me about some of your failures and what you learned. He said, what I'll say, and he shared with me a few of his big failures. Anyone remember Virgin Cola? Yeah, that's one. He said, I've learned so much more from the failures, but what I know is that you've got to be risking failure all the time. You just don't want to drag it out for years. Try something, not getting the result I want, bam. Change what you're doing, pivot, learn, move on, fail fast and fall forward. I probably learned my greatest, most profound lesson on what it is to fall forward from my older brother. So Frank, this photo is of my brother Frank. So we grew up on a farm. Girls tended to ride horses more. Boys rode the bikes more. He was living in Qatar in the Middle East working as an engineer. And he went out one Friday with a couple of mates to go riding in the sand dunes outside of Doha. And it's actually illegal to do that, but they always did it anyway. And the reason it's illegal is because it's a bit dangerous, but Frank's like, she'll be right. And he was going up a sand dune, and his mates were on some nearby sand dunes, and he was going up a sand dune on his bike. And instead of coming down the other side, because you fly through the air a little bit, that's why it's fun. He went up and he started flying through the air, and he looked down and he realized there was no other side. It was about 25-foot drop, sheer drop onto some bedrock. And he was going through the air and he thought, this is bad. I think he probably had a few other little words in there as well. And this, oh dear, this is bad. Oh dear, this could be the end of my life. Probably a bit more colourful language. And then he hit the ground and he lay on his side. And he was like, I'm alive, good. And then he moved his fingers, good. Hands, yep. Arms, yep. And then he went to his feet, and then his legs, his feet, his legs. And he has never felt them since. Because in that moment of impact, as the bike went down, him still sitting on it, it severed his spinal cord at T8, right about here. He was airlifted to the local hospital. I got down there about 10 days later. My mum had flown in from Australia, and people had come in and gone and what have you. And I was there with him when I think the morphine was slowly wearing off, and he had been very much of the mindset, I'm going to come back in here and take these nurses out dancing. They were all totally robed Muslim nurses. I'm not sure they wanted to go dancing with him. But that's what he was sort of saying. I'm going to come back in here. I'm going to beat this injury, because there's people who have spinal injuries and they walk again. The doctors had told us it was pretty severe, and he probably wouldn't. But Frank was still living with this, oh yeah, I will. And this visiting Swedish neurosurgeon, he had been waiting for this visiting consultant surgeon to come in. And I was sitting at his bed when the surgeon came in. And he said to Frank, I've looked at your charts and the MRI scans, and he said, you know this is a very serious injury. And Frank said, I do, Doc, but I'm hoping you can tell me I can come back in here and take the nurses dancing. And he said, well, Frank, I can tell you that after rehabilitation, you'll have a very good quality of life. You'll be able to go back to work, you'll be able to drive, but you will not walk again. And so I encourage you to focus on your rehabilitation and not to focus on trying to walk. And I was holding Frank's hand, and I was holding back the tears because Frank loves to do everything outdoors. And he loves scuba diving, and he loves dancing, and he loves everything active. And he's 18 months older than me. He was 40 at the time. And I sat there holding his hands, fighting back the tears, and I just remember thinking, oh God, how is he going to process this bit of information? I mean, I could just see he was processing it for the first time 10 days after the injury. And he squeezed my hand after a few minutes, and his eyes were a bit dewy, and he said, Margie, I'm not going to give this injury the power to ruin my life. I may not be able to do 5,000 things anymore, but there's 10,000 I still can, and I want to do them all. And I remember in that moment, my heart just bursting with pride that in that moment, he was like, I will not be victim to this injury, and I will not give this the power to ruin my life. Well, he did go through rehabilitation, and it was definitely challenging, absolutely. He moved back to Melbourne, where we're from. But he works now as an engineer, and he drives, and he still goes out on motorbike trips. In fact, this photo was taken just a year or two ago. What you can't see is on the other side of that bike is a sidecar. But he has another bike, because he still has several bikes that have hydraulic wheels, because he loves motorbike riding. And he's not going to not motorbike ride because he loves motorbike riding. And he still goes scuba diving. and he lives a good life. And yes, he absolutely has challenges that you and I don't. He still travels. He went off to Europe last year, traveling around, doing all the Belgian breweries. He loves life. And I share that with you because so often we get caught up living in mental wheelchairs of our own making, focused on what we can't do, focused on what's not fair, focused on what should have happened, focused on the resources we don't have, versus focused on what we can do. Our legs work perfectly fine, but we can still be stuck in these mental wheelchairs. And so for you, as you think about what it is you want to accomplish, you've got to be willing to step back and go, how do I need to reframe this from what I can't do to what I can? And a very simple model that I use for myself a lot when it comes to really bringing your own A game to your work, to your leadership, to your team, to Paul Davies, is one, where are you focusing? Rich said earlier, what you focus on gets done. So focus on what's within your control. Focus on what you're able to do. Focus on your strengths. Focus on the learning you want to acquire. Focus on the progress that you're making, not on perfection. Secondly, what's the story you're telling yourself? Oh, look, it's really hard and I'm just not good at this. Or, oh, this is a great opportunity for me to learn and grow. Or, what's the story about someone else? Oh, well, this person is an interesting character to have to do business with, but hey, what a great opportunity for me to figure out how to work well and build trust with this person. And then our physiology, how we hold ourselves. I want you all just to stand up for a moment. Okay, I want you just to find a partner next to you. Just see if you can pair up someone next to you. Just tag them and say, you're it. And if you can't find them, put your hand up and find someone else, and there'll be someone you can't. Now, I want you right now, okay, little exercise here. Pick a person A and person B. So person A, I want you to put your hand out, person A, like this. And I want you to think about a time when you messed up and you failed and you felt like an idiot, or you were really down on yourself. I want you to just think about that. Have your hand out like this. Think about that. I want you to hold yourself like you're feeling like a bit of a loser. And maybe some of you have never felt like a loser, in which case I don't want to know you. But, and now person B, I want you with 2 fingers just to press down on their wrist and see what happens when you press down as they focus on something negative. Great. Thank you. Done. Okay. Now, take a big breath. Okay. Now, person A, I want you to put your arm and hand out again. This time I want you to think of a time you nailed something. You were bloody brilliant. They said, my God, you're good. And you're like, yes, I am. And you just felt like you were unstoppable. And really just bring that to mind. Now, person B, I want you to press down. Ha-ha. Did you see a difference? Okay. Now, we're not finished yet. Now I want all of you individually, play with me here, play with me. I want you to close your eyes. I'm going to go and grab all your wallets off the table. I want you to put your hand on your heart. And I want you to cast yourself 3 years into the future. And I want you to connect with a vision that inspires you, something that excites you, that lights you up. Maybe it's a specific goal, something that you go, oh, I'd feel really good. Focus on what it is you want to create over the next 3 years. How old will you be? I'll be 42. I love that no one laughed. That's great. That's good. Okay, really, so focus on where you want to be in 3 years. Focus on a specific, what would it look like? Picture yourself in that place of success. Picture yourself feeling really good about where you are and what you've done and the lives you've changed and impacted and what you've learnt and who you've become. Focus in on that vision that inspires you, the strengths you've developed, the new skills you've got stronger at. And now I want you to think about the story. What's the story you would have to be living in? I can accomplish whatever I set my mind to. I'm capable of great things. I'm an excellent leader. I can learn and I can be resilient in the face of setbacks. Now I want you to take a couple of big deep breaths to the bottom of your belly. I want you to really stand tall. Feel the courage. Breathe in courage and breathe out doubt. just really stand tall in your own greatness, in your own strength, in your own courage and ability to overcome adversity and overcome fear. And picture yourself now with a challenge you've got coming up and dealing with that challenge from the space you're in right now, from being really grounded in your own worth and value and strength and courage. And I want you to imagine yourself with a little line around you, and inside the line, a little circle is what's comfortable, and outside that circle is what's courageous. And I want you, just very ever so slightly, take a small step forward outside your comfort zone towards your courage zone, and imagine yourself nailing whatever it is you're doing. And really be present to your strength and your ability and your courage in this moment, and how you'll feel when you've done it, and how good you will feel about who you are and who you've become. Take a couple of big deep breaths, breathe in that courage, breathe in that vision, breathe in that sense of becoming, of growing, of learning, of contributing. And then I want you to open your eyes, and to two people around you, just give them a high five and say, "You've got this." So thank you, you may be seated, thank you. Give yourselves a round of applause for that. So I'm just going to quickly finish up with a couple of key things, and one is to build your currency of trust. This is clearly woven through everything that people are talking about up here. You want to be trusted as the number one go-to, indispensable source for getting the work done in a timely way, in an excellent way. And sometimes when we think of trust, we kind of think of it as I'm honest and I'm doing the right thing, but actually there's four elements. One, are you reliable? Are you doing things in a way that it's supposed to be done where you get the job done well and on time? And as you know with the metrics, and do you clock in as you're doing it with the people who need to know it's being done? Are you saying, yes, this has been done? Not just the customer on the ground, but how can everyone know I am super reliable and super responsive? Secondly, are you competent? And PDU offers you the ability to be making sure you're more competent. The skills that got you to where you are now are not sufficient to get you to where you need to be. You need to be continually upskilling yourself and making sure that you're also upskilling others in your team. Do you say what you mean and mean what you say? Are you having the conversations that you need to have in an authentic, candid, respectful way? And finally, do other people know that you care about what they care about? Sometimes I've seen people, yes, everything's fine, but other people go, at the end of the day, I don't know that they actually care about me. So make sure you're having conversations that other people feel valued. And you do that. And as you do that, you embolden others to get out of their comfort zone. You embolden others to be braver. Because if it's just you doing what you do, that's not enough. You guys have got to be amplifying the ripple effect of courage. A few years ago at a trapeze school, I said, this will be great. I jumped out of a plane when I was 20. Can't be that hard. I got up there to go off the platform, and I froze. And what was so awful about it is I was there with some good friends who started yelling my book titles to me. Find your courage, stop playing safe, train the brave. I'm like, shut up. But I reached out eventually with a big almighty scream, and off I went. What the great thing was, I realized I hadn't missed my calling to join Cirque du Soleil. But I share that with you because fear lives in the body. I froze because we are wired not to do it. There was a safety net. I had a harness on, this big hunky guy behind me with the ropes. I couldn't have hurt. It would be more risky crossing a road. But in that moment of decision, I was like, I can't do this. And so when you have other people around you who are saying, find your courage, maybe not exactly that, but you can do this. You've got this. I just got you order. You've got this. Let other people know you've got them. You've got them. You can do it. A few words of encouragement can go a very, very long way. So help rally people behind a collective purpose. Get them believing that they can be braver than they may otherwise feel they can be. And if nothing else, just recognize that every time you act in the presence of your fear, every time you make a decision to do something or say something or pursue a bigger goal that creates a risk, a chasm that you may not be able to close, that you may fall short, every time you do that, you dilute the power that fear has over you, and you grow your own. So I cannot encourage you enough. Every day, ask yourself, what would I do today if I was being brave? Where do I need to get uncomfortable today? And in wrapping up the 6 key points that I just shared with you, set a bold course with that big why. Challenge the story that you tell yourself. What's another story I could tell myself here? Risk those uncomfortable conversations. Give the love, give a hug, as Ed said. Focus forward. Build trust. You build trust in every conversation you have. You have the opportunity, every interaction you have with everyone in this room is an opportunity to build trust. And every time you go out of your way to let other people know you care, you build trust. And every time you do what's right, and every time you show that you're responsive, you build trust. And finally, emboldening others to be braver. Because as Anaïs Nin once said, life shrinks or expands in proportion to our courage, and you are braver than you think you are, but in order for you to realize how courageous you can be, you have to step through that fear and you have to take action anyway. Thank you.